My name is Helen Matthews, and the family brunch that was supposed to celebrate my Stanford acceptance became the explosive confrontation. I woke up early after a restless night, anger burning in my chest. Not the quiet disappointment I'd carried for years, but something fierce and bright. They had missed everything that mattered to me. But the instant Stanford validated my worth, suddenly I was the center of their universe. My phone buzzed. Looking forward to brunch. I've made reservations at Meridian, their private dining room. This calls for somewhere special. Meridian, the upscale restaurant where Jessica had celebrated passing the bar exam, where Olivia had announced her engagement. I had never eaten there in my life, despite living in the same city for 6 years. But now I was worth Meridian. I spent the morning walking, cataloging all the moments they had missed. Graduations, achievements, the time I took myself to the emergency room with bronchitis, because no one was available. But also remembering the moments they had been there for my sisters. Jessica's law school celebration, Olivia's Fashion Week debut, family ski trips I wasn't invited to. For the first time, I wasn't making excuses for them. At Meridian, the maitre d' led me to their private dining room. Of course, it couldn't be a normal table. Mahogany, fresh flowers, city skyline view. The kind of room where families who actually supported each other might honor their daughter's accomplishments. At 11 a.m., they entered like celebrities, my father booming, "Our Stanford girl," as he gave me an awkward hug. Jessica offered air kisses and mentioned a client who wanted to meet me after hearing about Stanford. Olivia looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her smile forced. We settled around the table, champagne pre-ordered, conversation flowing in directions I'd never experienced with my family. They asked about my research, Stanford's program, my future plans, but I could hear what was missing. They weren't asking about me. They were asking about what I represented to them now. "Tell us about Dr. Sarah Chen," my mother said, cutting her eggs Benedict. I explained her research and reputation. My parents nodded appreciatively, but I could tell they were less interested in intellectual content than name recognition. "The scholarship covers everything?" my father asked. 200,000 over 4 years? "That's an incredible investment," Jessica added. "Stanford doesn't throw money around lightly." They were glowing with pride, but it was the pride of ownership, not genuine love. Olivia had been quiet, picking at her food. Finally, she asked, "When do you leave for California?" "September. I'll move in August." "August," my mother repeated. "Perfect time to plan a send-off party." Garden party at the house, maybe 50 people. Another event, another opportunity for them to bask in reflected glory. I could picture it. My mother playing proud parent, my father talking about his daughter at Stanford, me standing there like a prop. Something snapped. "Actually," I said, setting down my champagne glass with more force than necessary, "I don't want a send-off party." The table fell silent. My mother looked confused, as if I had just spoken in a foreign language. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Of course we need to celebrate this achievement properly." "Do we?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "Because as far as I can remember, this is the first time in my life that you've wanted to celebrate any of my achievements." My father frowned. "Helen, that's not fair. We've always been proud of you." "Have you?" The question came out sharper than I intended, but I pressed on. "Because I distinctly remember graduating valedictorian from high school, and you missed the ceremony because Jessica had orientation at Harvard that same day. I remember publishing my first research paper, and when I called to tell you about it, Dad, you asked if it would help me get a better job. I remember getting my bachelor's degree with highest honors, and Mom, you stayed for 30 minutes before leaving to help Olivia prepare for an internship interview." The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica looked down at her plate. Olivia stared out the window. My parents exchanged glances across the table. "And yesterday," I continued, my voice getting stronger, "I graduated with a master's degree in computer science with highest distinction. I walked across that stage completely alone while my entire family was at Olivia's bridal shower, eating catered food and opening gift boxes. Helen, you know we would have been there if we could have." My mother started, but I cut her off. Could have? Or wanted to be? Because it's interesting that Professor Reynolds called you about Stanford and suddenly you could abandon that same bridal shower to rush over to my apartment. Suddenly this family could drop everything and drive across town at 10 o'clock at night. Suddenly I was worth the Dom Perignon and the private dining room at Meridian. My father's face was getting red, the way it did when he was embarrassed or angry. You're being ungrateful, Helen. We're here now, aren't we? We're celebrating your success. My success? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Dad, this isn't about my success. This is about Stanford's validation. You're not celebrating me. You're celebrating the fact that you can now tell your business associates that your daughter goes to Stanford University. That's not true, my mother protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? I turned to face her directly. Mom, when was the last time you asked about my research before yesterday? When was the last time you showed interest in anything I was working on? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it, looking genuinely confused. I can tell you when, I continued. Never. None of you have ever asked about my work, my interests, my life, unless it came with some kind of external validation that made you look good. Jessica finally looked up from her plate. Helen, I think you're being a little harsh. We've all been busy with our own careers and lives. Busy? I turned to her. Jess. I've lived in this city for 6 years. 6 years. How many times have you visited my apartment? She hesitated. I don't know. A few times. 0, I said. The answer is 0. Last night was the first time you'd ever been to my apartment. But you knew exactly where Olivia lived when she moved here for her modeling career, didn't you? You helped her apartment hunt. You threw her a housewarming party. The truth was settling over the table like a heavy blanket. Olivia looked like she might cry, but I was past caring about anyone else's comfort. And Olivia, I said, turning to my younger sister, I know this is hard for you to hear, but when was the last time you called me just to talk? Just to see how I was doing? Olivia's eyes filled with tears. Helen. I can tell you when, I said. You call me when you need help with your computer, or when you need someone to explain something technical, or when you're having problems with a boyfriend and need advice. But when was the last time you called just because you missed me? The question hung in the air, and Olivia's silence was answer enough. I looked around the table at my family, these people who shared my DNA but had never really known me, never really seen me, never really loved me for who I was rather than what I could do for them or reflect back to them. For 28 years, I said, my voice getting quieter but more intense, I have been trying to earn your love and attention. I studied harder, achieved more, worked longer, hoping that someday you would notice me the way you noticed Jessica and Olivia. I told myself that you were just different, that you expressed love in different ways, that I was being too sensitive. My mother was crying now, dabbing at her eyes with her cloth napkin. But yesterday, standing on that graduation stage, looking out at the empty seats I had reserved for you, I finally understood something. The problem isn't that you express love differently. The problem is that your love for me has always been conditional. My father started to protest, but I held up my hand to stop him. Let me finish. Your love for me depends on my achievements, on what I can do to make you look good, on how I reflect on this family's reputation. Jessica's love was never conditional. You loved her even when she failed her first bar exam. Olivia's love was never conditional. You loved her even when she dropped out of college to pursue modeling. The tears were flowing freely down my mother's face now. Jessica looked stricken. Even my father seemed to be struggling with emotions he rarely showed. But me, I had to be perfect. I had to achieve constantly, excel at everything, make no demands on your time or attention, and never ever expect you to prioritize me over anything else. And even then, even when I did everything right, I was still invisible to you until Stanford made me worthy of your attention. I stood up from the table, my legs unsteady but my voice strong. I'm going to Stanford and I'm thrilled about it. But I'm not going so you can tell your friends about it. I'm not going so you can feel proud of yourselves for raising me. I'm going because I earned it on my own with no support or encouragement from any of you. The dining room was completely silent except for the soft sound of my mother's crying. I love you all, I said, my voice breaking slightly for the first time. But I can't pretend anymore that this family has been anything other than toxic to my sense of self-worth. I need time and space to figure out who I am when I'm not desperately trying to earn your approval. I walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. When I was little, I used to dream about having a family that loved me unconditionally. Yesterday, I finally realized I do have that family, it's just not this one. It's the professors who mentored me, the friends who supported me, the colleagues who believed in me when you couldn't be bothered to show up. I left them sitting at that expensive table in their expensive restaurant, surrounded by the remnants of a celebration that had turned into a reckoning. The drive home was a blur of tears and shaking hands. I had to pull over twice because I couldn't see through the emotional storm that had finally been unleashed after decades of suppression. When I finally reached my apartment, I collapsed on my couch and cried until I had no tears left. But underneath the pain was something I had never felt before. Relief. For the first time in my life, I had spoken my truth to my family. I had refused to pretend that their conditional love was acceptable. I had drawn boundaries that I should have drawn years ago. My phone was ringing constantly. Text messages were flooding in. My mother, my father, Jessica, even Olivia, all of them trying to reach me, trying to explain, trying to fix what couldn't be fixed with words. I turned off my phone and sat in the silence of my apartment, processing what had just happened. I had essentially blown up my family. There was no going back from what I had said. No way to pretend that everything was fine. I had burned bridges that might never be rebuilt. But surprisingly, I didn't regret it. Over the next few days, I avoided all contact with my family. I took time off from work, claiming I was sick, which wasn't entirely untrue. I was sick of living a lie, sick of accepting crumbs of affection, sick of being invisible until it was convenient for them to see me. Emma came over on Tuesday evening, having heard through mutual friends that something had happened at my family brunch. I told her everything, and she listened without judgment. "I'm proud of you," she replied when I finished. It took incredible courage to say those things. Did I destroy my family? I asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at me for days. "Helen, you can't destroy something that was already broken. What you did was refuse to keep pretending it was healthy." Her words helped, but I still felt raw, exposed, uncertain about what came next. A week after the confrontation, I received an email from Professor Reynolds. He had heard about my family difficulties through the academic grapevine and wanted to check on me. We met for coffee, and I found myself telling him about the brunch disaster. "Helen," he said after I finished, "I owe you an apology. When I called your family about Stanford, I assumed they would be overjoyed and supportive. I had no idea they had missed your graduation. It's not your fault," I assured him. "You did me a favor, actually. You helped me see the situation clearly. Family relationships are rarely simple," he said thoughtfully. "I had a difficult relationship with my own father for most of my life." "Really?" "I wouldn't have guessed that." "Oh, yes. He was a practical man who couldn't understand why I wanted to pursue theoretical computer science. We barely spoke for years." He smiled sadly. "We reconciled eventually, but it took time and a lot of painful honesty." "Do you think they'll ever understand what they put me through?" I asked. "Understanding is one thing," he observed. "Change is another. But you've given them the opportunity to do both. What they do with it is up to them." 2 weeks passed before I heard from any family member directly. The first contact came from an unexpected source. Olivia. She texted me, asking if we could meet, just the two of us, somewhere neutral. We met at a small cafe near the university campus. Olivia looked different, tired, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen her before. She ordered coffee but barely touched it. Her hands wrapped around the warm cup like she was trying to absorb comfort from it. "I've been thinking about everything you said," she began quietly. "And you were right. About all of it." I waited, not sure where this was going. "I never called you just to talk," she continued. "I only reached out when I needed something, and I never realized how awful that must have felt until you said it out loud." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "I've been the baby my entire life. Everyone took care of me, solved my problems, made excuses for me. I never learned how to be a good sister because I was too focused on being taken care of." "Olivia." "No, let me finish." When you left the restaurant that day, Mom and Dad and Jessica all started talking about how ungrateful you were being, how harsh you were. But I kept thinking about my bridal shower. She paused, wiping her eyes with a napkin. 50 people came to celebrate me getting married. 50. And when Mom and Dad heard about Stanford, they abandoned all those people. People who had taken time out of their day to celebrate me to rush over to you. Do you know what that told me about their priorities? I shook my head. It told me that even I, the supposed golden child, only mattered until something more impressive came along. If they could abandon my celebration that easily, what did that say about how they really saw me? This was not the conversation I had expected to have with Olivia. I had always seen her as the beloved daughter, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. But sitting across from her now, I realized she had been trapped in her role just as much as I had been trapped in mine. "I'm sorry, Helen," she said. "I'm sorry I never saw how badly they treated you. I'm sorry I never stood up for you. And I'm sorry it took your pain to make me realize how messed up our family really is." We talked for 3 hours that day. Really talked, maybe for the first time in our lives. Olivia told me about the pressure she felt to remain the perfect, helpless daughter, how terrified she was of disappointing anyone, how she had never been allowed to develop real independence or problem-solving skills. I told her about the loneliness, the constant striving for approval that never came, the way I had learned to minimize my own needs to avoid burdening anyone. When we hugged goodbye, it felt different than any embrace we had shared as children. This was the hug of two women who had finally seen each other clearly. A month later, I received a long letter from Jessica. It arrived by mail, actual handwritten pages on her law firm letterhead, which told me she had taken this seriously. "Helen," it began, "I've been trying to write this letter for weeks, and nothing I say feels adequate. But I need you to know that your words at brunch have haunted me in the best possible way. You were right about everything. I did get preferential treatment. I did know exactly where Olivia lived and helped her apartment hunt while never visiting your place. I did receive unconditional support while you had to earn every scrap of attention. But here's what you didn't know, and what I'm ashamed to admit. I was threatened by you from the moment you started school. You were naturally brilliant in a way I never was. I had to work incredibly hard to achieve what seemed to come easily to you. Instead of celebrating your gifts, I participated in diminishing them. Instead of being the supportive older sister you deserved, I was competitive and cold. I convinced myself that you didn't need support because you were so capable. But the truth is, I was relieved when Mom and Dad focused on Olivia instead of comparing us to you constantly. Your success made me feel inadequate, and rather than dealing with my own insecurity, I joined in making you invisible. I know this doesn't excuse 20 years of neglect, but I want you to understand that my behavior came from fear, not indifference. I was afraid that if our parents truly saw how remarkable you are, they would realize how ordinary I am by comparison. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I've spent my life competing instead of connecting. I want to be the sister you deserve, but I understand if you're not ready for that relationship yet. I'll wait as long as it takes. The letter went on for 4 more pages, detailing specific memories she had of times she could have supported me but chose not to, apologizing for each instance with a specificity that told me she had really examined her behavior. I cried reading it. Not from sadness, but from a complicated mix of grief for what we could have had, and hope for what we might still build. My parents took longer to reach out, and when they did, their approach was characteristically different. My father sent a brief email asking if I would meet him for coffee, just the two of us. No fanfare, no agenda. My mother wrote a long, rambling letter that apologized for everything while also making excuses for everything, showing that she still didn't fully understand what she had done wrong. I met my father at a small diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where nobody would recognize us or make a scene. He looked older somehow, as if the past month had aged him years. "I don't know how to talk about feelings," he said without preamble after we ordered coffee. "I never learned how." My father wasn't exactly the emotional type. I nodded, waiting. "But I've been thinking about what you said, about conditional love, about how we treated you differently than your sisters." He paused, stirring his coffee with unnecessary focus. "You were right. We did treat you differently. The admission surprised me. I had expected denials, excuses, deflection. The thing is, he continued, I always thought that was a good thing. I thought we were raising you to be independent, strong, self-sufficient. I told myself that Jessica and Olivia needed more attention because they were less capable than you. But what I realize now is that what we were really doing was taking advantage of your strength. We let you carry yourself because it was easier for us. We focused on your sisters because they demanded our attention and you never did. His voice cracked slightly on the last words. I failed you as a father, Helen. I missed the moments that mattered because I assumed there would always be more opportunities. I prioritized the squeaky wheels and ignored the one who was quietly excelling at everything she touched. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he asked, how do I fix this? How do I make up for 28 years of getting it wrong? I don't know if you can make up for it, I said honestly. But you could start by changing how you see me going forward. Not as the independent daughter who doesn't need anything, but as a person who deserves the same love and attention you give Jessica and Olivia. He nodded slowly. I'd like to try. If you'll let me. The conversation with my mother was harder. She alternated between tearful apologies and defensive justifications, showing me that she still didn't fully grasp the depth of the damage that had been done. She kept focusing on intentions rather than impact, saying things like, but we always loved you, and we never meant to hurt you. I finally had to tell her that good intentions didn't erase harmful actions, and that love without presence wasn't really love at all. She left that conversation angry and frustrated, which told me she had a lot more work to do before we could rebuild anything meaningful. But slowly, carefully, with the family members who were willing to do the work, relationships began to shift. Jessica started calling me regularly, not to network or ask for favors, but just to talk. She told me about her cases, asked about my research, shared stories from her life that had nothing to do with achievements or status. Olivia and I began meeting monthly for coffee, building the sister relationship we had never had. She started making decisions independently, standing up to our parents when they tried to manage her life, finding her own strength. My father made an effort to understand my work, asking genuine questions about artificial intelligence and machine learning. He attended a lecture I gave at the university, the first academic presentation of mine he had ever heard. Afterward, he said simply, I finally understand why Stanford wanted you so badly. You're remarkable. The healing wasn't linear. There were setbacks, arguments, moments when old patterns resurfaced. But for the first time, we were all committed to honesty instead of pretense. 6 months after the confrontation, I was preparing for my move to Stanford. My apartment was full of boxes again, but this time the packing felt different. I wasn't running away from my family, I was moving toward my future with their genuine support. Jessica flew in to help me pack and drive to California with me. We spent the cross-country trip talking about everything we had never discussed: our childhoods, our dreams, our fears, our hopes for the relationship we were building. When we arrived at Stanford's campus, she helped me move into my graduate housing, met some of my new colleagues, and joined me for dinner with Professor Reynolds and Dr. Sarah Chen. Watching her genuine interest in my academic community, seeing her pride in my achievements without any underlying competition or resentment, I realized how much our relationship had changed. As she prepared to fly back east, she hugged me tightly and said, I'm so proud of you, Helen. Not because of Stanford, not because of your achievements, but because of the courage you had to demand better from all of us. 2 years into my Stanford program, I was thriving academically and personally. My research was progressing beyond my wildest expectations. I had built meaningful friendships with my fellow doctoral students, and I felt genuinely happy for the first time in my life. My family relationships continued to evolve. I had regular video calls with Olivia, who had started her own business and was learning to trust her own judgment. Jessica and I had developed a real friendship based on mutual respect and genuine affection. My father made an effort to visit me in California, showing genuine interest in my life and work. My relationship with my mother remained the most complicated. She struggled the most with understanding that love required presence, not just sentiment. But even she was slowly learning to ask about my life without immediately pivoting to her own concerns. Later that week, I received an unexpected call from Jessica. I've been doing some soul searching, she began without preamble. I always knew I got preferential treatment, and I never did anything to change that dynamic. No, you didn't, I agreed, not willing to let her off easily. I should have been a better sister. I should have supported you the way siblings are supposed to support each other. Her honesty surprised me. Why didn't you? Insecurity, she admitted. You're naturally brilliant at everything you try. I've had to fight for every achievement. It was easier to distance myself than confront my jealousy. This revelation was startling. Jessica, the golden child, jealous of me? I'm heading to San Francisco next month for a case, she continued. If you decide to accept Stanford, I could help you look at apartments, introduce you to some friends in the area. It was the first time she had ever offered to help me with anything. I'd like that, I said cautiously. My feelings about Olivia were more complicated. Of all my family members, she had shown the least understanding of my perspective. She had grown up being the center of attention, and having that suddenly disrupted must have been shocking for her. After much reflection, I decided to write her an email. I didn't apologize for standing up for myself, but I did acknowledge how the family dynamics had affected us both. We've both been shaped by patterns we didn't create, I wrote. You've been cast as the baby who needs protection and indulgence, while I've been the forgotten middle child. Neither role has been healthy for us. I ended by suggesting we meet one-on-one, without the pressure of our parents or Jessica present. To my surprise, she agreed. Meanwhile, I carefully reviewed the Stanford materials and requirements. After confirming all the details with the computer science department, I officially accepted the scholarship. The excitement of this new chapter in my life was beginning to overshadow the family drama. As I started planning my move to California, I felt a growing sense of clarity about my relationship with my family. I didn't want to cut them off completely, but I needed to establish healthier boundaries. I needed them to respect me as an individual, not just as a reflection of their own aspirations or a bearer of prestigious achievements. I wrote a lengthy letter to my entire family, outlining my thoughts and feelings. I expressed willingness to work on our relationships but made it clear that things needed to change. I agreed to participate in family therapy when my schedule allowed and set specific boundaries about communication and expectations. I love you all, I concluded, but I also need to respect myself. Let's build a new kind of family relationship based on mutual respect and understanding. Stanford represents a turning point in my future, and I would like to share that journey with you but on healthier terms. As I sealed the letter, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time, I was taking control of how I allowed my family to treat me. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms. 3 months later, I found myself surrounded by packing boxes in my apartment. Stanford's fall semester was approaching, and I was preparing for my cross-country move. The past months had been a whirlwind of paperwork, housing arrangements, and preparing to leave my current research position. To my surprise, Olivia had offered to help me pack, a gesture that touched me deeply. Our relationship had slowly begun to heal through honest conversations and shared understanding of how our family dynamics had affected us both. When Saturday came, I felt nervous about spending extended time alone with Olivia. Our coffee meetings had been in public places, with the safety net of being able to leave if things got uncomfortable. Now she would be in my space for hours. Olivia arrived promptly, dressed casually in jeans and a t-shirt, quite different from her usual fashionable attire. The first hour was slightly tense as we worked silently, packing books and kitchen items. Gradually, though, the rhythm of the work broke down the barriers between us. I always thought you didn't like me, Olivia admitted suddenly as she wrapped a coffee mug in newspaper. I looked up, startled. Really? I always felt invisible to you. She shook her head. I looked up to you so much when we were kids. You were so smart, so capable, but you always seemed distant, like you couldn't be bothered with me. That's not how I saw it at all, I replied. I always felt like the family outcast. You were the baby, the princess. Everyone adored you. We spent the next few hours unpacking more than just my belongings. We discussed our childhood, our perceptions of each other, and the family dynamics that had shaped us both. For the first time, I understood the pressure Olivia had felt to be perfect and adorable all the time. It's exhausting, she confessed. Always having to be the cute one, the charming one. Do you know how terrified I am of getting older? My entire value in the family is based on being the baby. By the end of the day, I felt closer to my sister than I had in our entire lives. It wasn't a complete resolution of our issues, but it was a beginning. My father had offered to help drive my belongings across the country, and after some consideration, I accepted. The prospect of spending several days in a car with my father would have terrified me a few months ago. Now I saw it as an opportunity to continue rebuilding our relationship. We began having monthly family therapy sessions via video call, which created a structured space for addressing issues as they arose. Our therapist, Dr. Garcia, skillfully created a space where each of us could share without interruption. My father, typically stoic and business-oriented, spoke more openly about his feelings than I had ever witnessed. My mother listened more than she talked, a remarkable change from her usual dominance of conversations. Jessica acknowledged her competitive nature and how it had affected our relationship. Olivia spoke about feeling pigeonholed as the baby of the family. When my turn came, I was able to express my long-held feelings of invisibility without the anger that had fueled our confrontation. This is just the beginning, Dr. Garcia told us at the end of the first session. Changing family patterns takes time and commitment from everyone. We agreed to continue monthly sessions, a commitment I hadn't expected my family to make, but was touched that they did. The drive from the East Coast to California gave my father and me hours of uninterrupted conversation. We talked about his business, my research interests, and gradually delved into more personal topics. He told me stories about his own father, a demanding man who had rarely expressed approval. I began to understand how my father's upbringing had shaped his parenting style. I never wanted to be like my father, he admitted as we crossed into Nevada. But I ended up repeating some of his mistakes anyway. You're trying to change now, I pointed out. That's more than he ever did, right? He nodded, a small smile forming. You're very generous, Helen. More than I deserve. When we arrived at my new apartment near Stanford's campus, my father helped me unload and set up the basics. As we arranged furniture and unpacked essentials, he seemed genuinely interested in my new environment and academic program. We met with several of my new professors and colleagues, and I noticed a significant change in how my father introduced me. Gone were the qualified praises or comparisons to my sisters. Instead, he said simply, "This is my daughter, Helen. She's truly the most brilliant person in our family." The pride in his voice was unmistakable and uncomplicated by the expectations and conditions of the past. It was a small moment, but it meant everything to me. A year after my confrontation with my family, Olivia's wedding day arrived. I had been asked to be a bridesmaid, not out of family obligation, but because Olivia genuinely wanted me there. The ceremony was elegant and emotional, and during her reception speech, Olivia included a tribute that brought tears to my eyes. "I want to thank my sister Helen for teaching me about resilience and courage," she said, looking directly at me. "For showing me that it's never too late to speak your truth and rebuild relationships." As I stood in the reception hall, surrounded by family and friends, I realized how profoundly things had changed in a year. My family was not perfect. We still had disagreements and occasionally fell back into old patterns, but there was a new foundation of honesty and respect that hadn't existed before. On the second anniversary of my master's graduation, the day that had started this whole journey, I received a package from my family. Inside was a photo album they had created together, filled with pictures and memories from my academic career. But instead of just focusing on achievements, it included photos of me as a child, essays I had written, projects I had worked on, moments they had previously overlooked or forgotten. The inscription on the first page read, "To Helen, who taught us that love isn't about perfection, it's about presence. Thank you for not giving up on us, even when we gave up on you." Looking through those pages, I saw that healing doesn't mean erasing the past or pretending the wounds never happened. It means choosing to build something new from the broken pieces, something stronger because it's built on truth instead of pretense. 2 years after my dramatic graduation day, I was well on my way to completing my PhD with distinction. My relationship with my family, while not perfect, was healthier than I ever thought possible. We had all grown from the confrontation that had been brewing for decades. My academic career at Stanford flourished beyond my expectations. My research in artificial intelligence gained recognition in the field, and I was invited to present at international conferences. The work felt meaningful in ways I had never experienced before, not because I was trying to prove myself to anyone, but because I was genuinely passionate about the potential impact. Professor Reynolds, now officially retired, but still active in research, visited Stanford to see my presentation at a major AI conference. To my surprise and delight, my entire family flew out to attend as well. Seeing them sitting in the front row, genuinely engaged and supportive, filled me with warmth I had never felt before. "I knew you were destined for greatness, Helen," Professor Reynolds said afterward, beaming with pride. "But I'm even happier to see how you've grown personally as well as professionally. The healing journey wasn't always smooth. There were times when old hurts resurfaced, when a careless comment or forgotten promise would trigger memories of past neglect. During one particularly difficult therapy session, my mother broke down completely. 'I don't know how to fix what I've done,' she sobbed. 'I spent so much time focused on managing everyone else's problems that I never saw how much you were hurting.' It was the first time I had seen her take full responsibility without making excuses. That moment marked a turning point in our relationship. I learned that healing wasn't linear and that rebuilding trust took time. But I also learned the power of setting boundaries while keeping the door open for growth and change. Our family therapy sessions became less frequent over time, but continued to provide a structured space for addressing issues as they arose. We developed new traditions that honored each family member equally. Instead of elaborate parties focused on achievements, we started having simple monthly dinners where we each shared something meaningful from our lives. These gatherings became some of my most treasured memories. Jessica's relationship with me evolved in ways I never could have imagined. She started seeking my advice about career decisions, acknowledging my insight and intelligence in a way she never had previously. We began a tradition of weekly phone calls, something we had never done before. "I've always been proud of you," she confessed during one of our calls. "I just didn't know how to show it without feeling threatened." Her honesty continued to surprise me. She was working hard in therapy to understand her competitive nature and was making genuine progress in changing old patterns. My relationship with my mother remained the most complicated of all. She struggled more than anyone else with understanding that love required presence, not just sentiment. But even she was slowly learning. She started asking about my research with genuine curiosity, and occasionally called just to check in without having an agenda. During one of my visits home, I found her reading one of my published papers, taking notes in the margins. "I'm trying to understand your work," she explained sheepishly. "I realize I never really asked about it before." It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. As I approached the completion of my PhD, I reflected often on the journey that had brought me to this point. The empty chairs at my master's graduation had seemed like the ultimate rejection at the time. Now I saw they had been the catalyst for the most important growth of my life. The journey taught me to place my value in myself, not in others' recognition or approval. People express love in different ways, sometimes inadequately, but that doesn't necessarily mean the love isn't there. I discovered the power of speaking truth even when painful and setting boundaries without completely severing relationships. Most importantly, I discovered that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting the past or excusing harmful behavior. It was about freeing myself from the weight of resentment and creating space for new, healthier connections. The most valuable relationships, I realized, are often the ones we have to fight for. Family isn't the perfect dream we imagine, but the imperfect people we learn to love despite their flaws, and who learn to love us back in healthier ways. My story doesn't have a fairy tale ending where everything becomes perfect. We still have difficult moments, times when old patterns threaten to resurface. But we now have tools to address these challenges and the commitment to keep working on our relationships. Standing in my Stanford lab, surrounded by cutting-edge research and brilliant colleagues, working on projects that could change the world, I often think about that lonely graduation ceremony that started everything. The empty seats that had once represented abandonment now symbolize something else. The space that was created for real, authentic relationships. to grow. Sometimes the people who love us most need to lose us before they can learn how to love us properly. Sometimes we need to stop accepting less than we deserve before others will start giving us what we're worth. From the deepest wounds can come the greatest wisdom. My path to Stanford had been paved with pain and neglect, but it had also led to healing and growth that extended far beyond academic achievement. My name is Helen Matthews, and this is how I discovered that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what actually matters.